Today I'm sharing an Instagram Live I did a couple weeks ago with Michael Zindell, who is not only a talented surface pattern designer, but he's also the president of product design for a prolific housewares and giftware company. So I pick Michael's brain all about what someone who hires designers looks for from a designer, from an email pitch or from a portfolio or any sort of interaction with designers. What are art directors looking for?
So glad to see your shining face. I talk to Michael all the time on Slack, but I do not get to see him very often, so it's good to see you. So I gave a little intro earlier, but as people are just joining, Michael is a really talented surface pattern designer, but in his day job, he's a very talented product designer. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction for people who don't know you?
Sure. So I work as a product designer myself, and for a company that does housewares and home decor. Just in case no one knows what those words mean, it's sort of like everything that you put in your home, from mugs to plates to decorative aspects for the wall or giftability, little self-purchase or things you would buy as gifts for other people. Pretty much the gamut of things that you buy for yourself and for your home. And currently, I'm the president of product design for my company, and I've been there 10 years. And I have about 20 something years experience in the industry. And I've always been part of it. I started right out of school as a studio designer, and I just maintained myself within this industry for that long. So that's my background. Yeah. And I've dabbled in other things along the way, as designers tend to do. And I freelanced and do surface pattern, industrial design. I'm just one of those people, I think, much like yourself and probably everyone listening, that it doesn't stop. It's in your DNA. You can't stop doing what you love. So have at it. Anything's up for grabs.
Definitely. And the kind of products that Michael's talking about, these home decor products, are like right up my alley personally. Not everyone has the same style as me, of course, but decorative, super cutie. This is the kind of stuff that I design artwork for my licensing portfolio and for my client work. And if you guys have any sort of themes in your portfolio that are similar to what you see on my Instagram, then that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about right now.
That's a good point to make, is that so much of what we look at for inspiration, or what we aspire to be, with all this, sort of culture of competition that the internet breeds and that Instagram breeds, it's a good reminder that, when it comes to product, and this is, I'm speaking specifically about what I do, but also what you do and what so many other people aspire to do or do in their day-to-day job, is that it is very much based on the consumer, right? So you bring up you consume as well as put out there. And yeah, that's great for me to hear, because it makes my day that another designer would see something I do that, day to day, I'm like, oh God, can't believe I'm doing this again. But that it speaks to a customer, that it speaks to the client, that it speaks to basically the audience of middle America is what you have to aim for. I mean, that's where the bulk of the power is for buying. You think of Walmart and all the stores that cater to the everyday, they call them Joe and Mary. That's who you're really aiming for. And if in the interim we can find ways to eke in cool trend or things that you and I would like, that's the true win, because then you've made it.
Yeah, well, that brings us to one thing that I love to discuss with Michael is trends. If you guys don't have subscribed to my newsletter, every month I put out a trend board related to surface pattern and these type of products, that exactly what we're talking about, gift and stationery type products. And so I love chatting with Michael about trends, because he is in it every day and has to do the same thing. And so talk to me. I mean, you sort of just brought it up, but how important are trends in you and your team's work, and how do you find inspiration for that?
Yeah, so trends are kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Because I was just thinking about this before going live, right? Like, and I have this thought that I want to share about this later, but you need to like it's a chicken and egg type relationship, because if you don't put stuff out there, it can't sort of viralize to the level that it becomes a trend. So in some ways, all of us control what the next trend is, and sometimes it's your following what the trend is. And it's that fine line of like, are you a leader? Are you a follower? But the reality is it's like a closed loop circuit. Like there's no way to say that you're one or the other, because without either, nothing, it all comes to a halt. So for us, even if we aren't, say, I don't know, to put it in like vernacular, like flamingos, like even if we aren't necessarily going to do a flamingo line or, position that to a customer or a client, knowing that flamingos are in and have been and maybe need to be, elevated to whatever the next level is. You did a great presentation once about like combining trends, or like how you can morph like rainbows and this, and I think it was rainbows and rockets, and you do the same thing with flamingos. Like, how do you make it different this year? It's always important, even when you're not going to directly sell, to show you're aware. So a client might be very safe and they might think flamingos are just too wild and too bold for their customer, but they will appreciate you knowing that, even if it's no thank you. So there's a double-edged sword with that, and like walking on like what you chase, what you really believe is sellable, and then what you still need to know to show like, I walk the walk and I talk the talk. And
totally, you have to be aware of what's happening in the market, because it's commodities, right? We're just making commercial art, right?
I mean, it's really about showing that you know your industry, and like you're a professional, and you could pick any other industry and compare it. Like a chef wouldn't just cook only what he thinks. He's always trying new things and tweaking menus, and this year's fall menu isn't the same as last fall menu. That's the same with product. Like you always have to be pushing the envelope. It's just a matter of like the degree that you push before it becomes, I guess, obsolete. And for us, I mean, like you said, we talk about trends all the time, and like everything else in my life, I can't turn that part off. I think I used the term with you the other day, like it's almost like cultural archaeology, because you're seeing like, why does someone gravitate to this, and what is it about, like you mentioned, why sloths again, and
so
it used to be like why owls, and why a million every year you could pick whatever.
The hot animal, whatever. We're always looking for that.
Narwhals, whatever it is.
Totally.
It's interesting to try to figure out like what's going on sociologically that's causing people to gravitate to things. And I think now, like with COVID, you and I spoke about this the other day, I'm really interested to see like what happens to that pendulum. Like, is it going to be like 9/11 where everyone goes so super safe and so scared about like being different that everything becomes boring, or, religious or spiritual? Or is it going to go the other direction where it's like, F this, you only live once, like be crazy, be colorful, be whatever.
Yeah, I saw a post from Trend Bible. We're gonna get off topic. I can talk about it. We'll do another one on trends, because I would just keep going. But let's move on, because guys, if you want to know my opinions on trends, we'll chat about it some other time. But yes, trends are. The point is, the very like basics is that trends are super important. Yes. As much as you might want to be like that artist that's like their own special orbit. If you want to sell your work, if you want your work to be, unless you're a fine artist in a gallery, but if you want to sell your work to be put on products that people are going to buy, you need to know the trends, right? So basically, getting into the mind of an art director, and the reason that I contacted you to get online is because every designer is always trying to figure out how to stand out when they're reaching out to art directors, and how to position themselves as someone who's going to be a great partner to work with. And you have a team of designers, and you have in the past hired freelancers. One extremely charismatic one that I could think of named Elizabeth, but probably maybe some others. I don't know about their personality. But anyways, I wanted to start with talking about portfolios. And what are some of the things that you look for if you were hiring a freelancer right now, which I know you're not, but is there anything that you might see in a designer's portfolio that would be a clear sign they weren't a good fit, or they weren't skilled enough? How important, what are you looking for when you're getting an email with someone saying like, I want to work for you?
So I haven't really done hiring in quite some time. We've had a pretty steady team, but I've done quite a fair bit of portfolio reviews and hiring over the years, including the current positions that we have. And I should put a caveat out there that these opinions are clearly based on like my specific role and my specific company and what we do. And every company and every art director is totally different and probably looking for different things. There's some art directors that are totally the type that are like big picture wand wavers, and they have the staff that runs around and does everything. And there are others that are more holistic, and that's really, our team is more holistic, where we work together but as individuals. And I expect a given project to a freelancer or to in-house, A to Z is run by that designer. So it's not like, okay, you're good at lettering and then you hand it off to so-and-so who's good at drawing llamas, and it goes to so-and-so who's good at coloring. It's all done, within one person's range. So when I'm looking at portfolios, well, first of all, there's just sort of like the art of the interview, and really what I think works in your favor best is the ability to, art aside, connect with the art director like we're talking right now, and show that you really know your stuff, right? Like, you're coming into a product creation company, and you're not talking about web design, and you're not talking about graphic design, and you're not talking about fashion design. You're talking about what you're going to be doing at this job, and you've done your homework, hopefully, and also know enough about the stores that this product is sold in, and the customer base that it's aimed at, and the style that you go for, and already have that sort of like under your hat if you can get the information. Now, obviously that's not always possible because like you've never been through these doors before. So that's all sort of like serendipity, but it's great when that happens because it shows that the person's serious, and more likely, instead of fibbing about it and like having done homework, they really live that life and they know it. Like when we first met and talked, it was like, she gets it, like she can do this project. It was very obvious within 5 minutes. And I had been following you for a while, so I had that sort of background. But as far as things that are a bad fit, like I said, coming in, you could be as talented as anybody. You could be a grade A, whatever you are. But if that whatever you are isn't the job, immediately off the bat, it's going to be off-putting. Like, it's very difficult for an art director to sit through, I'll use web design as an example again, or say catalog work, and try to figure out what that person would do when sitting in a seat designing product for sale, because there's no way that work.
Yeah, exactly.
As talented or technical as you could have everything under your belt, grade A, superstar in that world, it just doesn't translate. So I'd say number one, like, you have to have a portfolio that is applicable to the job. Even if that means you have to make it on the fly, like the week leading up, you have to do the legwork, the legwork. Because it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means I'm not interested in your catalog or your, whatever it is you do. I want to see, applicable work. Yeah. And that's not to say that illustration and things that sort of bridge that gap aren't applicable. They totally are. I'm just talking about like far-flung, differences.
Yeah, 100%.
I also, I think I mentioned to you, it's really odd, like being part of this sort of Instagram surface pattern community, because the mindset that I sometimes run into is a little bit contrary to what I find reality to be, which is, or my reality to be, not reality as a whole, which is, when you work in licensing and you talk to licensors and licensees, it's all about consistency, right? Like, they want you to have a branded look. They want you, well, at least for that level of licensing, right? They want you to have a name and a look and a style, and they want to know that when they come to you for Christmas, it looks just like what you did for fall. And the hand is, identical.
Yeah. And I think that is a certain level of licensing. Yes. Like if you're a big name licensor, like they want that look. And I see that someone actually asked that exact question. So I know you're getting to it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but she said, do you like to see a signature style or versatility? And so, yeah, for licensing, sometimes if you're a big name, it's like, we want to see your look.
Right.
But
for
where are you at?
No. I appreciate it. And that's perfect. Like, I wouldn't say don't show it. It's lovely to see that people have multifaceted sides to them and maybe even do things, they run something on the side as a freelance business, or they're a book illustrator. Like, all that is perfectly great to see and even applicable. But when it comes to only being able to do one style, that's where it starts to fall apart. Because and for the sake of the audience, I'll say, like, what an average day in product design is not slow. It's fast paced. You can have, pick 5 retailers that you can think of, from Bed Bath & Beyond to Target to Walmart, all coming at you for like, change this, change that, want this, want that. Right now we're in spring season, and every single retailer has a different version of what they want spring to look like. This one wants bunnies, and that one wants wildflowers, and this one wants, whatever it is. And the reference that they give is all varied. So you almost have to be an emulator where you can adapt, not copy per se, but you can adapt to, they want watercolored bunnies. You don't necessarily have to be a watercolorist, but you need to know, I can figure out how to get that done. Maybe it's purchasing from Creative Market. Maybe it's, I can, on a weekend, maybe I can like use Procreate and I'll do a quick sketch and then we can use that. Like, there's always, it's not always 100% like being a licensed perfectionist art. Like, lettering doesn't have to be hand lettered. The art doesn't have to be non-reproducible. Like, you can always find shortcuts to things. And I think seeing that in a designer, problem solving, not just I can do, let me draw it better, let me paint it better, let me whatever it better, but problem solving, how we can like get to the end game, that is really good to see. Because it's not all, like when we worked on the Christmas program, it was like, we even had a conversation about, we don't need to do hand lettering. It's like, that's overkill, because the odds that a buyer's going to come back and say, change Merry Christmas to Festive Christmas, and then you got to redraw the whole word over again. It's like, no, just use a royalty-free font and change it. And you can tweak, if you want to outline it and tweak it and do stuff to it, that's perfectly fine. But the hand drawing and, the minutia of like what people think of as being like the perfect artist kind of goes out the window at times. It's really more about being fluid, being able to adapt.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great point, because that is something that I did learn working in-house. And so a lot of people coming into this industry never worked in-house as a surface designer or as a product designer or anything like that. They learned about, maybe they were a graphic designer, maybe they were something totally different, but they learned about surface pattern design. They love making patterns, but yeah, it's not, they don't have the experience of the fast-paced retail environment that we both know, and I wouldn't say love, but it gives you such an education, right? So having that ability, now how that can translate in your portfolio. I know you mentioned like fonts and Creative Market and stuff. Of course, your portfolio, you cannot buy something and put from Creative Market and put it in your portfolio. Let's anyone who heard that and thought they were off the hook and they just needed like $100 to ball out for their portfolio. No. But what Michael was trying to say.
Do you think it's okay if you had maybe worked at a previous development company, like say, you mentioned and you were showing it, but we're up front and said like, here's a line of baby clothes that I designed, but the flower, that was purchased art or this, because to be honest, there's so much product that's done cobbled together that if you don't reference it, it's a blank spot in your portfolio. So I wouldn't say that you don't, I would prefer not to see it, but if you're upfront about it and say like, here's layout that I did, or here's concept that I did using, for instance, like if we licensed some of your art, but I did all the product mock-ups for it, I would probably at some point show it and say, this was purchased art from a licensor that we used, but like we made this 4-foot presentation.
We made it fit into different products. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so if you have that kind
of a portfolio, then it is like your core, like I would keep that maybe as a separate thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Totally. Yeah, so variety is good, adaptability, different styles. Paris is asking, how have you seen someone successfully show their versatility in their portfolio? So, I mean, you can speak to that if you have any ideas, but, I think that people worry about, kind of like the flow of a portfolio or things, especially when we think about our website. We want everything to look nice right next to each other, right? We don't want like some wildly different stuff. But sometimes showing off that versatility is important, and it's less important than like the quick page look of like everything all is the same palette or whatever it is. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or we can also address questions at the end.
When you're in an interview, most of the time the timing is set, right? Like it's a half hour. The person has so much time, they got to get back to work, whatever. And what I find is that, like, you got to remember, if you have a website that's perfectly curated, you still have that website, and that website can be emailed to them, a follow-up email, an intro email. It can be put on your resume. It's there for them to access. So you don't necessarily have to repeat that live in front of the person when you're sitting across the desk, or however those interviews are going to happen now. I mean, over Zoom or whatever.
Right.
I would say, like, it's about your personality first. Secondly, like, if you're going through the portfolio, you also have to remember, visual people lose interest real quick. So like if it's literally like page after page of here's another mug, here's another mug, here's another mug, it's like, okay, shoot me. Like, I live in the world of mugs. Like, but if you had, say, here's some stainless steel hydration, here's some mugs, I did this plate. Oh, here's some patterns I did for packaging, and here's some patterns that I did for clothing, or here's stuff that I just did for myself. I run an Etsy company, Etsy store on the side. Like, well-rounded and just sort of diverse. I would say
it's fine to have them lined up, right?
More, and hit the sweet spots. Like, for most product companies and pretty much anyone who makes product anywhere in any category, regardless of whether it's home or housewares, whether it's clothing or gift wrap or cars, whatever, seasonal. You have to have seasonal. It shows that you're able to work within constraints, because how many ways can you reinvent Black Orange Halloween, right? Like, how many ways can you do a sugar skull? Like, everything is always being reinvented, and there's never going to be a blank spot for that. There's always going to be harvest, there's always going to be Christmas, there's always going to be Halloween, and the minor holidays.
COVID can't cancel Christmas. We got to keep going.
I would say, like, depending on the company, focus less on the minor holidays like Valentine's and St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Americana is a big one. Everyday looks like florals and light home decor, like we call it carpet friendly. So like things that aren't wild and obtuse, but like actually would fit into the average sort of like beige and grayscale home. I think that a lot of times there's a lot of designers who do play with sentiments or sometimes you'll call it editorial, but like coming up with a saying and then developing a look around the saying, like not just hand-lettered words, but like what do those words inspire? And I would say the final thing is collections. So that doesn't need to be like 50 things, but when we meet with a customer, you're talking about retail and an end cap. So like a 4-foot section, it might have 10 items, it might have 20 items. But if you could take like a page and say like, here's an idea I had for Christmas, and everything plays well together, but isn't like the same polar bear on everything, but you have like a color palette established and the polar bear is on this and that's your hero shot. And you have a sentiment that ties in like just on like maybe a field of blue over here.
And whatever,
yeah, like the same way that you would develop a fabric collection where you have like your hero, your coordinate, do the same thing with product and show that like if someone gives you a brief, you can make so many different layers out of that brief, and it's not about like bam, 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 bam. Like you're really thinking it through and showing that like I can tell you a story, and I can also make that story something that evokes emotion in the person that wants them to put it on their shelf. I think.
Are you guys writing this down out in internet world? Are you guys writing this down? Who's taking notes? These are gems, people, gems. Well, that is great advice. I love that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, with every new job, new like freelance job you might have, or if it's an in-house job or whatever it is, there is a learning curve as a designer to figure out how to best work with an art director, right? And the question I get a lot from students is about how, like, I get so many questions about the details of working with an art director. And my response is like, don't be afraid to ask questions, because like, even, you know, I've worked with many art directors, I've done many freelance projects, I'm not new, but when I start working with a new client, you know, everyone's different and every product is different. And even if I've done, you know, I'm doing the same product I've done a million times, yes, I might come in with a little more information about like what I think it's supposed to be, but every company is different. And asking questions is not like, you know, the worst thing. So what do you think is the best way for designers to support their art directors and stand out as like super helpful from the get-go?
You know, I think that's a great question, because first of all, like, art directors, most of them are human beings too. And I think that we all understand, you know, most art directors came through the ranks, right? Like, they were artists or they were studio designers. So I think they understand, you know, you want to get it right because they want to get it right.
Yes.
And I think on the technical side of it, it's expected that you need to ask, like, what file types do you want? Is there a color limit? Do you want RGB? Do you want CMYK? Like, and what I find, you know, as on the freelance side of things, like when I work with a client, I usually ask them, do you have like some other designer's example packet that you could send to me, like, so I can see like what your expectations are as far as a technical pack, or what type of,
That's a good idea.
yeah, or like sometimes there's actually, you know, like a format, like where people will lay things out specifically. Sometimes it's more free form and they let the designer come up with it. Sometimes art directors don't know or care and they figure that out after the fact. But I would say, like, helpfulness, I mean, in the people that I hire and work with and have worked with for a long time, helpfulness is like a #1 quality in an employee, like the willingness to learn, go out and harness the information. And I mean, if you need to go on Skillshare, if you need, like, all these things that are now available to us, to have the forethought to go do that is excellent. If you then don't know, I am perfectly fine with people asking the questions needed. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because it's better to like waste the time doing that than it is to like have paid out the invoice or paid the salary or whatever. And now you have this pile of stuff that, you know, China kicked back to you because it was wrong, or, you know, they can't interpret it, or they can't use the file type. It's so much better to like get in there.
Get it right from the beginning, right? Yeah, exactly.
And you never know. Like you said, me and you, like, we've done this forever. And tomorrow, if we met a new client, we'd have to do that. It's not something I think you should be embarrassed about. And the reality is, if you do run into an art director that has an attitude about that, don't work for them.
You got it.
It's okay to say no. If you off the bat feel like you're hitting a wall, it's just going to get worse and worse every time you work with that person. So it's okay. Like, you know, we always talk about culture now. Like, there's this inability, like, you have to monetize everything. No, it's okay. Say no and go to the next company, the next designer, the next whatever. Because anyone who's not willing to like set you up to succeed is just a nightmare. You know, so like, I know when I hire people, I want that art and I want that person to be successful. I want to hire them again. I want to build a relationship, so I'm not bouncing to like more and more people. And so I think that's a good thing to learn, to know. And I also think, like, for students, you will never be prepared. School does not prepare you. And even like 1 or 2 jobs don't prepare you, because like you said, every place is different. So you always have to be like, know what you don't know, learn what you don't know, and never be so full of yourself to think like you somehow have it covered, because it can change so quickly. Like with product category, or, you know, say one manager leaves and someone fills their shoes, you got to sort of re-engage that all over again.
Yeah, 100%, totally. And another point that when we were talking about this before that you brought up that I was like, this, you're so right, is not having, in this industry specifically, in getting your art on products, not having an attachment to your art like you are the Michelangelo of like whatever floral patterns. You know what I mean? Like that is something, and that is like another thing that I learned so hard in working in house that people don't get a chance to work in house with. Oh, he's freezing. No. Oh, there he is. He's back. Okay. Yeah, but that's something I learned so much in house was that things get changed around so easily, and it has nothing to do with you. It's not a personal attack,
Right.
and you just have to go with it. This is, people are making decisions and changing things all the time. So if an art director does come to you with like, hey, can you change the colors? And this part is a little wonky, and can you do this? It's not like, but this was the best I could do, and therefore this is like a failure. Like, no. Just
no. You have to have like, I would say, I think people would say thick skin, but I don't even think it's thick skin. I think it's like just sometimes indifference. Like you have to realize, like anybody else in the world, though we probably have all done this for our lives and we're creative children and like it's part of our DNA, it's still just a job. And the CEO and the buyer and the retailer really don't give any chance about like what your thoughts or feelings are. So it really is about like doing a good job. Now that being said, I have to tell you, like I am routinely butthurt all the time.
Yes, we're all human, of course.
Sort of like laugh and then there's like all the work that you don't necessarily enjoy or particularly like, but there's a freedom in that too, because it takes a lot of the stress off of your own creative engine when you're sort of executing. It helps you practice, it helps you grow, and sometimes it's even fun because it's sort of like you get to be this other person for a day. And I think you said that in like one of your licensing videos about like you love to watercolor and it's not really on brand for your licensing portfolio, but it well rounds you and it shows that you love doing it. And that's the same thing when you work on like, let's say it's a religious group, like for me, or an Americana group, like not my favorite things to work on, but there is like a freedom in it because it's all of a sudden like all those details that you worry about, you're like, I'm just going to go with it and see what happens. And, in terms of like preciousness, I think there's ownership. Like you want to be proud of what you do and you want to make sure that like, whatever you're drawing, it's the cutest or the best or the quirkiest, whatever the task is, but it's almost like beyond what the image is. You want the pride to come like beyond that. Like you did a good job. The art is well made. It's technically, perfect. It can go on, it's buyable, it's sellable, and like, it's all great. But I do think like, this was kind of relating back to the trend thing. It was like I don't even remember when it was, like a year or two ago. I remember someone on Instagram saying like, nobody did flamingos before I did flamingos. I can't believe this. And like, it says a lot about that person.
They fancy.
It says a lot about that person's personality, and it could just be like their Instagram persona or whatever. But the reality is like, for those people out there, like I do see a lot of artists online talk about like being hacked or, somebody copied me or my artwork was stolen or this or that. And I think like, I just want to address this briefly because it seems like there's these two camps of like, this should never happen. And like this other camp of like, why does anyone care? And the reality is like, it's a very gray area in the middle, and one that I think we need to be realistic that we're all part of. Because let's say if I'm working on a project and the customer sends me a reference pack, I can tell you right now without like trying to cause problems, I have had art from people I know on Instagram show up in reference packs because those buyers have Instagram and they see a Christmas scene they like, or they see a wrapping paper they like, and they snapshot it and they say, I want something like this. And I don't feel like when I'm working on that I'm copying, because I'm not. But the reality is that anyone who puts themselves out there, anyone whose art is out in the world, on product or in a portfolio or on Instagram or on a chat room or Facebook or wherever, it's part of a vernacular now. And if you put, like I keep saying flamingos, let's change it. Like if you say popsicles and I say popsicles and Sarah says popsicles and Tiffany says popsicles and we open Instagram and go through your feed and it's popsicle, 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 popsicle. And then you walk into Target and there's popsicles. That's why. Like, that's why it's happening. And conversely, it could happen in reverse. You drew popsicles because you walked through Target and you saw a cute end cap and thought, I can do better popsicles. Like, it's that loop I'm talking about where like it all feeds itself. And trust me, I don't want this to be blurred. I don't think anyone should ever copy someone else's art. But without one person affecting the other person, there would be no trend, there would be no community, there would be no conversation, because you can go through feeds and like I know at least 4 or 5 designers that sometimes if I don't look at the name, they all look the same to me. And it's not that they're doing a bad job, it's that they're all speaking sort of this like
commercially viable language, right?
It's a commercial piece of art, but they sort of speak with this accent, and then there's these people in lettering, and they speak in this accent, and we're all speaking the same language, but like there are definitely like regional accents and accents from different companies or different categories. So like, yeah, I think that the preciousness aspect of it, sure, defend yourself, go after anyone legally if they copy you directly, but I would wager to guess that any artist out there backed into a corner, like hand on the Bible, would say, yes, I've seen other people's art and I've done my version of it. Like that, because that's how ideas happen. And I think like having that sort of like lack of preciousness, lack of, I don't want to say ownership, but like you're part of a game, you're part of a commodity, and you're making things to be sold. And at the end of the day, your portfolio is yours and it represents you, but it's still in the grand scheme of the earth, like it's a blip, and you can't sort of get hung up on all of the nuances of like, if it's not like, how do I make it better? Like you just have to roll. And, you know, portfolios, I mean, the portfolio I'm sure you showed last year to this year is probably wildly different because you always like what you last did. And you look at stuff from years ago and you're like, oh my God, that's what I was doing, you know, and you're like, get that out of here. And so even to that degree, I think we all move very quickly, like, and we forget because of this culture, you know, like you're so inundated on Instagram that you forget
much stuff. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's so much stuff.
So great points. Those are like, that's totally, you know, spot on from a product, you know, perspective that I know people who are getting into surface pattern design and looking for licensing and stuff might not have thought of. But let's wrap up with what would you say is your top recommendation for a designer who's looking to make an impression when they send a pitch to an art director? You know, if you're getting an email, what is your top recommendation for, you know, someone sending it out?
So emails that stand out are emails where the person definitely, you know, touch on things I've said. Definitely, it doesn't sound like a cold call where they're just like, hey, I'm Joe Schmo and I'm a great designer and I can work for you. And then it's just like, you know, this random, like almost like it sounds like someone coached them to be like positive and say all these things. And it's like, but none of those things have any weight to them. So I would say like, make sure, you know, if you can do research on the company, if you can figure out what they do, doesn't necessarily mean reaching out in advance, but like, it's pretty easy these days with the Internet of Things to like figure out what's where and what's what and who, you know, what products are being done. I would venture to like really make sure that it's also not that you know the industry, but is it an industry you really want to work for? Because sometimes designers are just so hungry for work that I mean, and this is literally things that have happened. Like I've probably in my life had 3 or 4 designers that were so hungry for work and they didn't make it past like a month or 2 because they didn't really know what they were getting into, and they realized too late that sort of what they presented was way too inflated, right? They exaggerated their skill set, they exaggerated their ability to adapt, and they just couldn't make it work without a support system. So really make sure, you know, do you want to be engaged in this, and do you want to really have, I don't want to necessarily call it stress, but it is a level of stress to like perform.
It can be, yeah. I mean, especially if you're working in-house, I feel like.
Oh yeah,
freelancers get a little bit of a removal. Yeah.
Yeah, there's meetings with buyers, there's trade shows, there's, you know, all the stuff that, you know, you end up liking, but in the beginning it's really intimidating to like constantly be in front of people or like trying to prove yourself, walking around like trying to look for ideas with other people and feeling like, oh, I got to show them I know what I'm talking about. Like there's a lot of like, I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but like, you know, the workplace sort of mentality and what you have to sort of go through. I wish school would teach that, like how to be a good employee and like how to work well with others, because you sort of just get thrown in and have to figure it out. And everyone's different. So but back to the question, as far as a portfolio, like in an initial introduction, I would probably include, 2 or 3 of your strongest, what you perceive to be your strongest identifiable looks, and know that, that's what's going to open the door. And then the door is the interview where you present the pared down version of, what you think they want to see, not your whole 8 years of, portfolio. And like these days, I think obviously a social media presence does help, because like for me, I can go out, oh, so-and-so applied. I know that name. Is that so-and-so from Instagram? Then you can look and be like, oh, and like on my own time, I can scroll back 3 years and see what you were doing. So yeah, I think, just being honest and your own with your expectations, and then also doing the legwork to make sure, this is what I want and this is what I know about what I'm getting myself into.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. Gems. Well, that was good. We maybe have time for 1 or 2 questions. I think we were trying to address them as they came by. Maybe 1 or 2 we can hit up. But while if anyone has questions, you can type them in. But while people are doing that, will you tell us how we can, shower you with adoration? We'll follow you. I mean, follow Michael. You can see his name, from this actual live. So follow him first of all. Yeah. But is there anything else that you have going on that you want to talk about and promote?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do, like I said in the beginning of this, I try to be involved in so much stuff. And I've obviously picked your brain and other people's brains about like the things you're great at and the things they're great at. And, I started putting stuff out on the internet. So I've been participating in a lot of Spoonflower things.
Yeah, you have a great Spoonflower shop.
I've had some interviews with them. I've just started building my personal website, which is a work in progress, at michaelzindell.com. Just the usual stuff. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Pinterest, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Redbubble, Spoonflower. Like a lot of what I have out in the public sphere is, to be quite honest, it's my personal pursuits, because so if anyone's looking at it and saying like, God, this is the exact opposite of what he was saying, it's because like day to day, I just get so bored with the regular stuff that I do that in my free time, I like to sort of reach out and do like the things I can never get a chance to do. So like, hence teal tigers and pink pineapples. And like, I try to explore crazy trends and come up with my own thoughts. And really, I would advise like designers, to do that if you are working a full-time job, because it really does like feed my thought process. If you just work in a bubble of work, it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you can branch out and like, especially today with Skillshare and even taking classes in like printmaking or ceramics or anything that like expands your creative process, it all reflects back sooner or later. So a lot of what's out there, like my fabric designs and things like that, they're a little bit less than they're a little wilder than mass.
Yeah, totally. They're very stylized, but I love them. So great question. This is such an important one is, how do you feel about artists sending a follow-up email after submitting artwork if they haven't heard back?
I don't personally have a problem with that.
You have to. You just have to.
Yeah, and I mean it's all in the delivery too. Like I've definitely gotten ones that were quite demanding. Like, I know I'm great. Why didn't you get back to me? And it's like, okay, well that is deleted and blocked. But if someone's just following up, like, hey, and I especially understand having been in the shoes of like a 20-something out of college. It's like you just want to hear yes or no, so you can like move your hope somewhere else. So like, I usually, I can say I've been lucky that I've never been like in a job search where I've had 10,000 applicants and they're all asking for replies. But if I get like 2 or 3 people that are like, hey, what were you thinking? I usually write back and say like, at this time, I don't think you're a good fit or blah, blah, blah. But, I would probably, if I were that person, I would accept that answer and not keep, like, what could I do to make it better? What, like, it's not a school review. It's like, it's pass fail, right? So the portfolio made the cut or it didn't, and it's up to you to figure out how to make it better. I can't coach you on how to get this job. So if,
Right.
if a director writes back like, thank you, but no thank you, like just take that and
Yeah,
internalize it,
yeah,
try to make
definitely.
yourself stronger.
I think if you haven't heard anything, following up is important because, you know, you just want to know and yes or no. But if you definitely, if you've heard it and, you know, it's not right now, then yeah, you got to take that for what it is. If it's a not right now, you can follow up, you know, 6 months, 8 months down the road. And I always say, like, you know, a year from now, especially if it's something like freelance that's ongoing, not a specific job that you're applying for today, but like, you know, you can come back in 8 months. You have a different portfolio, as you said, so you can try again. All right, let's take one more question.
I've also had, sorry, I've had designers that I have really liked. I've loved their portfolio. I liked their interview. And then when I've extended the job offer to them, they were like, oh, I took something else. You know, that's happened too. And I will say that, like, you know, legally, yes, we're required to maintain those resumes for a while. Every job is. But there are definitely designers that I have met through the years where I keep they're in a folder on my computer, and every couple months I reach out to them just to say, hey, what are you doing these days? You know, it's a great way to build in reverse. It's a great way to like build a community of people that you can always call on for freelance or other things. So I think, you know, having that contact is good. But I will say in this day and age, it just like dating and other things, like people ghost. And sometimes art directors and companies, like, it's not personal. And sometimes the job description changed. Sometimes the budget went away, and you can't follow up and be like, hey, I know you applied, but guess what? Budget's gone, you know? And so you just don't say anything. It doesn't look good. So I wouldn't take it personally. I would just, you know, if you really want to know, send an email, but don't take it personally. Just move on.
Yeah, totally. Agreed. That's something I think I'm going to cover in a Instagram live next month is the idea of like keeping up that motivation when you're not hearing back and how you can kind of get in that mindset. I would talk to you forever. I wanted to get one more question in, but the truth of the matter is I have small children. They're going to be knocking down the door for snacks soon. So This is just the life that I live right now. I appreciate getting online with you so much. And I know that everyone who is watching is like, oh my gosh, these are gems. I'm going to save this to Instagram TV. And so if you came in late and you need to see the beginning, all kinds of great information. And at the beginning, we talked about trends. If you need some surface pattern trends, subscribe to my newsletter, elizabethsilver.com/fresh. Monthly trends for surface pattern and creative business advice and all that stuff. So I hope to see you there. Everyone's saying thank you. If you can't see the comments, Michael, everyone is really appreciative of your advice.
There we go. Such a great talk with Michael Zindell. In the description, I will give his Instagram and other information about him so you can go follow him. And if you would subscribe, I'm going to be coming out with a lot more videos in the future, and you can follow me on Instagram so you'll know all about these Instagram lives when they happen at esilverdesign, and share this with your friends if you find it helpful. Thanks so much.